So I wanted, before we get started, to let everyone know that I have a new podcast out, and it's called Meditations. If you like the Meditations segment of this current podcast, you'll like the Meditations podcast. It's nothing but 20 minutes of meditative sounds. And now, on with the podcast.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate. Just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
I was in downtown Boise, Idaho, and I saw a duck. And I knew he was lost because ducks ain't supposed to be downtown.
Good morning. It's Friday, Evil Friday, June the 6th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have headlines, patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, and the marketing of evil. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now the headlines for Friday, June the 6th. 81 years ago, 2,501 great American men gave their lives so that we could have our freedom. Today, we honor their sacrifice and remember their bravery and courage. Trump vindicated after nonpartisan CBO's left-wing leanings are exposed. Israel's defense exports hit record $15 billion in 2024, despite European pressure. Colts' Anthony Richardson suffers shoulder injury with quarterback battle looming. Just in, Trump orders DOJ to fully investigate Biden's AutoPen signatures. Trump torches Tesla dealership. And those are the headlines for Friday, June the 6th. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the political corner with Stuart Varney and Newt Gingrich.
Elon Musk just blow up the big, beautiful bill?
No, I think he's a brilliant guy. He single-handedly has put Americans back into space in a big way. But he doesn't understand politics. He proved over the last 4 months that it was an interesting experiment and it didn't work. And I think very few House or Senate members are going to take him seriously.
Really?
Yeah, they're just going to, look.
Oh, they dismiss his comment.
They're just going to say this is not, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I do think there are senators who have very real concerns on the spending side, and Trump's going to have to work with them to find a way to make them more comfortable, because it's not an automatic yes. And some are very serious guys who've been around a long time.
I can't imagine it not passing. I mean, what would happen if it didn't pass?
I have a big imagination. So I can imagine it not passing, but I would bet that it will pass. But it will take Trump personally meeting with individual senators, listening to their concerns, and in some cases finding creative solutions outside the bill. I mean, if somebody comes in and says, I really want to help cut spending, they have a rescission bill as a start.
Yep.
They'll have some more rescission bills. There'll be other things they can do. And look, this is what the Founding Fathers wanted. It's a legislative process. The House has to say something. The Senate has to say something. The President has to get involved. It's exactly the system the Founding Fathers wanted.
And that was the that was the political corner. Back in a minute. Thank you, and now the Patriotic Short.
It's one of the most iconic scenes in cinematic history. Jimmy Stewart at a bar begging God for guidance and redemption. The movie was It's a Wonderful Life, but it wasn't George Bailey on the verge of a nervous breakdown. It was actually Jimmy Stewart. Stewart was less than a year removed from combat when filming took place, and he was still suffering badly from combat exhaustion and mental fatigue from having flown 25 bomber missions over continental Europe. Jimmy was a different person when he returned from the war, observed his best friend Henry Fonda. He was hollowed out and the light seemed to be extinguished. Stewart was on the verge of quitting Hollywood and moving back to Pennsylvania to run the family hardware store when his friend Frank Capra threw him a lifeline with the part of George Bailey, a man struggling to understand his role in life. I didn't know how much help I needed until Frank reached out to me, Stewart would reflect years later.
And that was the Patriotic Short. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, motivation.
Further down, it looks straight at its prey, and it goes, wow, straight down into the Atlantic Ocean, straight down, eyes focused, arms out steady, and bam, it scoops up its prey, and it keeps on going. And I'm telling you, if you're going to blow up, if you're going to get to the next level, you got to stay focused. You got to learn how to concentrate. What makes a person average in their focus? And so what you're focusing on throughout the course of the day, it has to change. What you're looking at, what you're reading, what you're watching, the conversations you have. You must now be focused on your why, and you must be focused on your dreams. You must be focused on your goals. When you are great, you don't focus on a week. When you are great, you don't focus on a month. When you are great, you don't focus on a year. I'm not saying the same thing wrong with planning, but what I'm talking about is you concentrate on the 24 hours that's in front of you and you nail it. I want you to focus on here right now. Don't you worry about when you get home. You concentrate on this opportunity. You don't worry about tomorrow. You concentrate on this opportunity with all your might, with all your soul, with all your heart. You focus on this, and tomorrow will take care of itself. If you would just believe that your day coming, that the sacrifices you are making today, they gonna pay off. But if you do not believe, it ain't gonna happen.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now it's time to cool out with a little meditation. And that's a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Daily Stoic.
The most secure fortress. Remember that your ruling reason becomes unconquerable when it rallies and relies on itself, so that it won't do anything contrary to its own will, even if its position is irrational. How much more unconquerable if its judgments are careful and made rationally. Therefore, the mind freed from passions is an impenetrable fortress. A person has no more secure place of refuge for all time. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 8.48.
And that was the Daily Stoic. And now, His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron.
What burdens us? What's the burden of life? It's this old lie that we will become happy if we just get enough of the goods of the world. If we can just draw enough into ourselves and hang on to it, then I'll be happy. I will not be happy. On the contrary. What do we all want? Well, this lovely word here, rest, it doesn't mean like lying in a hammock. It means fulfillment. It means peace. It means the joy that we all want. How do you get it? You get it by imitating the rhythms and dynamics of the divine life.
And that was His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron. And now the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, the evils properly or popularly ascribed to big industrialists were not the result of an unregulated industry, but of government power over industry. The villain in the picture was not the businessman, but the legislator. Not free enterprise, but government controls. Unquote. That was Ayn Rand from the chapter Notes on the History of American Free Enterprise from the book Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, motivation.
Further down, it looks straight at its prey, and it goes, wow.
Thank you. And now the gaslighting corner. Every narcissist is a fantastic partner until you have a personality, needs, children, a career, or anything else that takes your attention from them. And that was gaslighting. Back in a minute. Thank you, Maria, then Stu.
But
yeah, Steve.
Right now, no need.
Steve Moore, I had Mary Daly on last week from the Reagan National Economic Summit, president of the San Francisco Federal Reserve. She said she was sticking to 2 rate cuts this year, but it doesn't look like we're getting it this summer. I got to tell you, what do you think?
I'm still a little nervous about inflation.
Okay.
So I'm not quite there yet. I don't want to be the skunk at the garden table, but I worry about inflation. So I can see maybe 1 rate cut. But look, you look at this report, you look at all the reports that have come out of the last 6 weeks on what's happening with the economy. It reminds me of that Beatles song, It's Getting Better All the Time. Thank you, Donald J. Trump.
Energy is down big, and that was one of the big issues, of course, because it's expensive to transport all this stuff. So the price of oil is quite important. Joel, are you also seeing capital move into energy-related funds?
Well, we are starting to see it now. You know, energy, as you point out, it has bottomed out in the minds of many. So I think there's a lot of excitement there. A lot of move. Oh, you mentioned also data centers. A lot of excitement about these nuclear power plants, and there's going to be more capital there.
Absolutely. And that's been an area that's been uninvested. Guys, amazing conversation. We so appreciate it. Joel Schulman, Joni Biley, Steve Moore, Alfredo Ortiz, John Lonsky, Cheryl Casoni. Great to talk with you all. The numbers were better than expected. The market is once again on fire. The Dow Industrial is up 309 right now. I will see you tonight on Maria Bartiromo's Wall Street and on Sunday on Fox News, Sunday Morning Futures. Varney and Company picks it up. David Asman in for Stu today. David, take it away.
No, I'm here. Good morning, Maria.
Sorry, Stuart.
You're welcome.
I don't know why they put David in the prompter, but I would not have said that. And Stuart, I know you have a nice anniversary coming up, so we're going to talk about that soon, too.
Yes, okay, we'll get into that a little later this month, okay? Just a little later this month.
Yes.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. Okay, first, we'll deal with the jobs report and the market reaction. Then we'll get into the Musk-Trump breakup. Now, in the month of May, 139,000 jobs added. That's fairly strong performance, unlike the limited number of private sector jobs reported yesterday. The unemployment rate coming in, no change, 4.2%. Now, stocks had been up before the numbers were released. There's also speculation that the fight with Musk will bring more support for the big, beautiful bill. That is another positive. The Dow up 300 points. This is pre-market. S&P up about 50. NASDAQ doing well, up 186. Interest rates, though, they are jumping this morning. Look at this. The 10-year Treasury at 4.47, getting closer to that 4.5% level again. As for the 2-year, you're back to 4% even right there. Bitcoin, where's that? It's now at 103.9, and that's where we cover the financial markets today. Now, the big question. Can Musk and the president patch up the feud or at least calm things down? We'll see. There were reports that there was supposed to be a call between Trump and Musk. Our sources say the president does not intend to speak to Musk today. A flurry of posts on X and Truth Social captured everybody's attention. Musk threw a tantrum, insulting the president and trying to damage his big, beautiful bill. Trump was relatively restrained. There was some conciliation. Billionaire investor Bill Ackman posted this: I support Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and they should make a peace for the benefit of this great country. Musk replied, you are not wrong. 2 points to make here. Number one, the Democrats are happy to see this very public fight. Number two, Senate Republicans are likely to side with Trump, making passage of the big, beautiful bill more likely. We've got a modest gain for Tesla stock after the huge sell-off yesterday. It's back up about 5%. Stay tuned, please, because any new posts from either side could shift the market, and so could a phone call if it were to take place. Yes, this is Friday, June the 6th. Very important date. It's the 81st anniversary of the Allied invasion of Normandy. My father was there. Varney and Company is about to begin.
And that was Maria Bartiromo and Stu Varney, Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now an article in The American Thinker, Built-in Bias, the Human Fingerprints on Artificial Intelligence, and it's the last paragraph. Although AI has made remarkable strides, it's not immune to bias. This underscores the importance of cross-referencing information and relying on multiple sources for a well-rounded perspective. Just as human thinking can be biased, AI reflects the data and design behind it. Fortunately, developers are actively working to identify and reduce these biases, making systems fairer and more reliable. Until then, AI should be used with both curiosity and caution, not as an unquestionable authority, but as a tool that benefits from human oversight. And again, that was an article in The American Thinker, Built-in Bias, The Human Fingerprints on Artificial Intelligence by George Matwijek. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from a book that's called Good Inside. What's the opposite of understanding? For this argument's sake, it's convincing. Convincing is the attempt to prove a singular reality, to prove that only one thing is true. Convincing is an attempt to be right, and as a result make the other person wrong. It rests on the assumption that there's only one correct viewpoint. And then my question is this supposed to be convincing? Further, convincing has one goal in mind, being right. And here's the unfortunate consequence of being right. The other person feels unseen and unheard, at which point most people become infuriated and combative, because it feels as if the other person does not accept your realness or worth. Feeling unseen and unheard makes connection impossible. Understanding two things are true and convincing one thing is true are diametrically opposed ways of approaching other people, so a powerful first step in any interaction is to notice which mode you're in. When you're in one thing is true mode, you're judgmental of and reactive to someone else's experience because it feels like an assault on your own truth. As a result, you will seek to prove your own point of view, which in turn makes the other person defensive because they need to uphold the realness of their experience. In one thing is true mode, exchanges escalate quickly. Each person thinks they're arguing about the content of the conversation when in fact they're trying to defend that they are a real, worthy person with a real, truthful experience. And again, is this convincing? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now another article in The American Thinker. Judge rules inmates must have panties. It's the last paragraph. I spent most of my life believing in and respecting the rule of law, and, in particular, respecting the institution of the judiciary and the importance of maintaining the independence of our judges. Bizarre excursions into Fantasyland like this decision force one to test that teaching and to agree with Miss Kelly's conclusion, quote, there is something sinister in the D.C. federal courthouse, unquote. And that was the last paragraph of the American Thinker article, Judge Rules Inmates Must Have Panties. And I don't know who it's written by. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, what does the phrase, if you're explaining, you're losing, mean? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, if you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the marketing of evil.
Chapter 5, Family Meltdown, the Campaign to Destroy Marriage. When 32-year-old Paul and his 17-year-old fiancée Anna walked into the Norristown, Pennsylvania courthouse to apply for a marriage license, the justice turned them down flat when he learned they had known each other for only one day. Yet after much pleading and persuasion, the judge reluctantly granted them their license, and Anna and Paul were married 3 days later. The wedding wasn't much. Only 4 people in attendance, no wedding gown, no flowers, no cake, not even a picture taken. He was poor, and she was poorer. As marriages go, this one didn't sound like it had too much of a future. Yet, exactly 50 years later, I was privileged to attend the golden wedding anniversary party of Paul and Anna Paulson, my grandparents on my mother's side. It was memorable. They were as loved by their many friends and relatives as George and Mary Bailey in the final scene of It's a Wonderful Life. Although their marriage had been arranged by their Greek families according to old country custom, hence the absence of any courtship, Grandmom and Grandpop had learned to love each other. Along the way, they raised 4 children, including my mother Louise, kept them safe and sound through the Great Depression, built a successful business, put all 4 kids through college, saw them all marry and produce 13 grandchildren, and lived a long and exemplary life of Christian service to others. What magic kept their marriage so rock solid despite the tremendous hardships they endured? I didn't know the answer to that as a 14-year-old boy at their 50th anniversary party, nor did the question even occur to me. Why would it? After all, their marriage didn't represent anything out of the ordinary, did it? When I was a kid, marriage was normal. Almost all grown-ups were married, and the marriage lasted until one of them died. That's just the way it was, or so it seemed. Today, decades later, every few weeks I hear about another friend or acquaintance whose marriage has detonated. With stunning rapidity, divorce has been transformed from something relatively rare to something commonplace. Indeed, divorce today is so common, we almost forget what a full-blown calamity it really is, the devastation of a family. Michelle Gauthier, founder of Defending Holy Matrimony, a Catholic organization, put it this way: all it takes is one confused spouse who thinks that divorce will solve their unhappiness. When that one spouse visits a lawyer, they place the entire family in the hands of a hostile court system. Children become wards of the state, and all marital assets are controlled by the courts. It is truly a tragedy. A tragedy, yes, and nowhere more so than in its negative impact on children. According to Judith Wallerstein, author of The Unexpected Legacy of Divorce and an expert on the effects of divorce on children, national studies show that children from divorced and remarried families experience more depression, have more learning difficulties, and suffer from more problems with peers than children from intact families. She adds, children from divorced and remarried families are 2 to 3 times more likely to be referred for psychological help at school than their peers from intact families. More of them end up in mental health clinics and hospital settings. There is earlier sexual activity, more children born out of wedlock, less marriage, and more divorce. It gets worse. Stephen Baskerville, a professor of political science at Howard University, says, virtually every major personal and social pathology can be traced to fatherlessness more than to any other single factor. Citing violent crime, substance abuse, unwed pregnancy, suicide, and other problems, he observes, fatherlessness far surpasses both poverty and race as a predictor of social deviance. Unfortunately, breaking a marriage contract today is easier than firing an employee hired last week or getting out of a cell phone contract. In fact, there really is no genuine civil marriage in America anymore. The contract part of the marriage contract is non-existent. After all, how can 2 parties enter into a supposed contract, and yet either party has the power to end that contract at any time, for any reason, whether or not the other party agrees? Obviously, there never was a true contract, a binding agreement, in the first place. Yet it is the binding, extremely hard-to-break nature of the marriage contract that is essential to marriage itself. Marriage is difficult, and there comes a time in many, if not most marriages, when conflicts and suffering cause one or the other spouse to contemplate ending the marriage. The marriage contract is meant to protect both spouses and their children against such a period of weakness. No-fault divorce destroys that protection. How did this happen? How have we managed to cripple civilization's primary institution, marriage, and to do so with such blinding speed? Let's begin our exploration by traveling back in time to the 1960s and 70s and listen to the feminist drumbeats. Keep in mind that like much of what was being preached and written about with religious zeal in those days of cultural revolution, even the most absurd ideas had a way of magically becoming public policy a few years later. Feminist icon Gloria Steinem said, "We have to abolish and reform the institution of marriage." Author and university professor Vivian Gornick said, "Being a housewife is an illegitimate profession. The choice to serve and be protected and plan towards being a family maker is a choice that shouldn't be." Author and Ms. magazine editor Robin Morgan said, "We can't destroy the inequities between men and women until we destroy marriage." Author and scholar Germaine Greer said, "If women are to effect a significant amelioration in their condition, it seems obvious they must refuse to marry." And feminist author Andrea Dworkin, "Like prostitution, marriage is an institution that is extremely oppressive and dangerous for women." Okay, let's be clear about what we're looking at. Pure rage and all-consuming hatred of men. If you think I'm exaggerating, read the writings of these people for yourself. You'll be shocked at the depth and intensity of their anger, the kind one associates with deep personal violation or trauma. Indeed, in some well-known cases, feminist leaders report having been sexually abused as children or beaten by a violent husband. Apparently, they have concluded in their blind anger that all men are predatory beasts and molesters, and thus are determined to save their fellow women from the slavery and oppression of family life. Most people who lived through the 60s remember the militant feminists and their angry speeches, demonstrations, and bra disposals. But when this spectacle left the front page of mainstream consciousness, along with the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, long hair, LSD, and the rest of the 60s psychedelic cultural revolution, did America just go back to normal? No, we had been transformed. Today, a generation later, we debate issues like cohabitation, divorce, same-sex marriage, civil unions, polygamy, and the redefinition of marriage, seemingly oblivious to the fact that marriage as a fundamental institution of civilization was crippled back in the late 60s and early 70s with the advent of no-fault divorce. Although radical feminism has always been too strident, and frankly insane, to be embraced by the American public, its core agenda has mysteriously become our reality. The same thing happened with abortion, the number one cause of feminists today. The public has never accepted the radical pro-abortion agenda. National polls consistently show barely 25% of Americans embrace unfettered abortion on demand at any time for any reason. Yet that radical agenda is the law of the land in the United States today. In the same way, the feminist movement, from the more mainstream variety that pushed women into the workplace to the radical man-hating variety that demanded an end to marriage and the mainstreaming of lesbianism, has succeeded in turning its agenda into public policy. Look at what its purveyors wanted: to persuade women to be ashamed of their roles as homemaker and mother and to set their sights instead on the workplace, to institute no-fault divorce, to make lesbianism an acceptable alternative to heterosexuality, and most of all, to free women from marriage. They scored big time, but how? While feminism was relentlessly driving the family apart from the sidelines, what on earth was the mainstream thinking? After all, it was state legislatures and judges and governors, not militant lesbians, who actually tossed out the powerfully binding civil marriage contract by instituting no-fault divorce. Judith Wallerstein describes the seduction of mainstream America. She writes, "Up until 30 years ago, marriage was a lifetime commitment with only a few narrow legal exits, such as proving adultery in the courts or outwaiting years of abandonment. American cultural and legal attitudes bound marriages together, no matter how miserable couples might be. Then, in an upheaval akin to a cataclysmic earthquake, family law in California changed overnight. A series of statewide task forces recommended that men and women seeking divorce should no longer be required to prove that their spouse was unfaithful, unfit, cruel, or incompatible. It was time, they said, to end the hypocrisy embodied in the prevailing climate of opinion was that divorce would allow adults to make better choices and happier marriages by letting them undo earlier mistakes. Within a few years, no-fault divorce laws spread like wildfire to all 50 states. But, adds Wallerstein, who conducted a groundbreaking 25-year study of children of divorce, what about the children? In our rush to improve the lives of adults, we assumed that their lives would improve as well. We made radical changes in the family without realizing how it would change the experience of growing up. We embarked on a gigantic social experiment without any idea about how the next generation would be affected. Contemplating the stupendous amount of pain, deprivation, and trauma we so jubilantly and foolishly invited into the national family a generation ago, during which time we overthrew most, if not all, of the rules we had lived by for centuries, we must ask ourselves, what happened to America during the 1960s? It seems like a combination of powerful factors, like planets that rarely align, all came together during that particular period and ushered in a transformation of the American mind. One factor was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It was to the 60s generation what September 11, 2001 was to today's Americans, a national shock beyond all other national shocks. It signaled the end of America's innocence, of the 50s world of Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best. The handsome Camelot president, he and Jacqueline were the closest thing to royalty in modern America, had his brains blown out on national TV. Like everyone else alive then, I remember where I was, in my 8th grade science class. It was right after lunch, and the teacher walked into the classroom and said, "I suppose you've all heard Kennedy was shot." My first reaction was, "Kennedy? He must mean the boy in our class named Kennedy." It didn't occur to me that it could be our president. Presidents weren't assassinated, just as married couples didn't get divorced. Assassinated presidents were people like Abraham Lincoln and James Garfield, but that kind of thing didn't happen in today's America. Kennedy's assassination was a major psychic shock, and shock has a strange way of opening people up to new ideas, and not necessarily good ideas. Then there was the Vietnam War. From an ideological point of view, it was arguably one of America's most altruistic wars, as we were there to stop the spread of communism and had little to gain ourselves. But the war's actual execution by America's leaders was incompetent and disastrous, as Defense Secretary Robert McNamara later famously admitted. The nation was polarized and intensely emotionalized over the controversial war. Powerful emotion also has a strange way of opening people up to new ideas. Then there was the rock music invasion from Britain. What started with the Beatles, Rolling Stones, and other groups immediately exerted a powerful hold on America's youth. Soon, it introduced and glamorized the psychedelic drug subculture, turn on, tune in, drop out, which was, in turn, turbocharged by widespread rebellion against the Vietnam War. A primary effect of mind-altering drugs is that they open people up to new ideas. Maybe that's why they're called mind-altering. And then, most devastating of all, there was a tremendous amount of confusion among America's churches and churchgoers over God. Remember the Time magazine Is God Dead issue? With America's traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs and moral standards in doubt or disrepute, alien philosophies and beliefs readily flooded into the vacuum: paganism, occultism, channeling, and New Age practices, and more. Similarly, without a godly paradigm whereby we understand that man's only real freedom is to be a servant of heaven rather than a slave of hell, our whole concept of freedom was transformed. This naturally opened America up to a torrent of liberation movements, from sexual liberation to women's liberation to gay liberation. In our morally weakened and confused state, even the most alien ideas exerted an immensely powerful influence on the national mind and mood. As if all this wasn't enough, there was something else at play, something seldom mentioned in polite circles out of fear of ridicule, and that is the issue of communist influence. We didn't just get high on LSD and fall off the cliff during the 1960s. We were pushed. Hard as it may be to believe today, when communism has been so thoroughly discredited, back during the 30s, 40s, and 50s, many people, including some well-known Americans, believed Marxism was a good thing. The seduction of secular socialism was in its heyday back then, including in the United States. During this time, the Soviet Union was engaged not only in its very public military and scientific buildup, but also in massive espionage and infiltration. And as the public record undeniably shows, the USSR had direct ties with the Communist Party USA. One key area actively targeted by the communists since 1935 had been Hollywood. Headquartered in New York, the Communist Party USA had decided to wrest control of the entertainment industry, and therefore of what Americans would see in their movie theaters by taking over Hollywood's labor unions. In his celebrated book, Reagan's War, Peter Schweitzer revealed, by the end of the Second World War, Communist Party membership in Hollywood was close to 600 and boasted several industry heavyweights. Actors Lloyd Bridges, Edward G. Robinson, and Frederick March were members, as were half a dozen producers and about as many directors. Some, I should point out, later renounced their Communist Party affiliation. It was none other than Ronald Reagan who took the leading role in throttling this attempted communist takeover of Hollywood when, as head of the Screen Actors Guild, he very publicly and courageously opposed them. It marked Reagan's entry into the world of politics and the anti-communist mission he would complete 40 years later when, as president, he took the central role in engineering the end of what he himself had aptly called the evil empire. But back in the era immediately preceding the 1960s, there had been many communists infiltrating America's government and institutions. Without a doubt, America came under a direct revolutionary assault, pushed primarily by avowed leftists of every stripe during the 1960s. Most U.S. college campuses were swept up in the revolutionary fervor, and leftist propaganda and agitation were everywhere. Believe me, I know. I was there. When all these various national assaults and traumas hit the nation at once, an unpopular war, a presidential assassination, music and drug cultural invasion, a massive erosion of faith, the anti-America subversion that previously had existed below the surface of society seized the moment and burst out into open rebellion. Looking back, one has to wonder just how successful the radical left was in subverting key American institutions, including government, education, entertainment, the press, and the churches. It's hard to say for sure, but it's very sobering to realize that today, America's colleges and universities are absurdly to the left of the mainstream. In fact, just about the only place in the world you can find real, bona fide Marxists anymore is on U.S. college campuses, where they are insulated from reality as tenured professors. Same with radical feminists, who also tend to be socialists. The National Education Association, purporting to represent America's public school teachers, is a leftist organization, as are the National Council of Churches and the World Council of Churches. Oh, by the way, maybe it's just a coincidence, but guess what Lenin, that's Vladimir, not John, did right up front to facilitate the communist revolution in Russia? He broke up the family by instituting de facto no-fault divorce, as celebrated Soviet expert Mikhail Heller explained. He wrote, "It is significant to note that one of the first things V.I. Lenin did when he came to power in the Soviet Union after the revolution in 1917 was to have passed what amounts to our no-fault divorce statutes. Lenin, and later Stalin, determined that in order to maintain control of the people, it would be necessary to completely destroy the family and restructure it. Thus, on September 16, 1918, a law was passed whereby one could obtain a divorce by simply mailing or delivering a postcard to the local register without the necessity of even notifying the spouse being divorced. This statute, along with the communist encouragement of sexual immorality during marriage, approval of abortion, and forcing women out of the home into the workforce, accomplished its purpose of destroying the Russian family. Unlike Lenin, who had guns, gulags, and thugs to enforce his will, America's revolutionaries, including the radical feminists, had no means of forcing their anti-marriage and other agendas on society other than the force of moral persuasion, or to put it more aptly, angry intimidation. Unfortunately, people who aren't strong and sure of their beliefs simply cannot withstand the demands of unreasonable, angry intimidators. They give in, they compromise, and they even adopt the bully's views as their own to keep the peace. And that's what's happened in America. Now that we've surveyed the sad road to family destruction we as a nation have merrily gone down, let's ask the obvious question. Is there a way back? Yes, of course. To begin with, we need to look at marriage with fresh eyes. Most newlyweds, when they get married, have no idea what they're getting into. At first, they think their infatuation is love. It's not. They think their physical and emotional need for each other is love. It's not. He thinks her enthusiasm to have sex is love. It's not. She thinks his giving in to her on every issue is love. It's not. Fast forward a few years. Most often children have come along, which logically should help cement the father and mother's relationship. Instead, in millions of American marriages, what started as wedded bliss has turned inexorably into the nightmare of hatred and divorce. And of course, for every marriage that actually falls into the abyss, others are teetering on the brink. So what happens in those few years? What turns heaven into hell? Can't men and women, dads and moms get along anymore? What is so bad, so intolerable, that they have to explode the relationship, break their solemn vows to God and to each other, and devastate their children? To put it perhaps too plainly, there is something in a man's makeup that is capable of drawing the worst out of women. And there is something about a woman's makeup that is capable of drawing the worst out of men. This is a spiritual inheritance we all share, having roots deep and profound. Basically, men tend to believe that women were born for the purpose of loving and supporting insecure, egotistical males, mentally, emotionally, and sexually, helping their men feel good about themselves, thus making them whole. But that, I hate to break it to you guys, is not how women really are, and it's not how they're supposed to be. In fact, being pressured to play that ego-supporting role turns them into liars, full of inner conflict and resentment. Women, if they're still fairly innocent and uncorrupted, also have a notion of how men are supposed to be that's actually about right. Men are supposed to be knights in shining armor. The problem is, men somehow have lost sight of this higher calling, and women, when they see their supposed knight in shining armor fail her in so many ways, develop contempt and resentment toward him. And this profoundly shapes both of their lives for the worse. Thus, without also a shared love of truth, which enables them to recognize and confess their flaws, and thus to metamorphose into truly noble people, theirs will never be a marriage made in heaven. But that is the ultimate purpose of marriage, to lead us to a closer relationship with our Creator by developing within us the character traits that befit God's children. For those sincere enough to embrace this challenge, marriage is the arena of life. The willingness to face one's own weaknesses and failings honestly, to suffer gracefully without becoming angry and resentful, to bear with patience the slings and arrows coming from the crazy side of your spouse. That's love, real love. And out of that slow growth of virtue comes, invisibly, no one else can see where your happiness comes from, the good life you've always wanted. Then come the green pastures, the still waters of marriage, the ever-deepening affection and concern for the other, the comfort of true companionship, the deep reservoir of strength sufficient to deal with any and all adversity, all of the transcendent joys of a long and fruitful life together. Doesn't this old-fashioned ideal of noble knights and noble ladies have the aroma of a vivid dream you once had when you were young? As though maybe things actually were like this once upon a time, long, long ago. Then again, maybe it's not a chronological gulf between then and now. Maybe it's another dimension called heaven on earth we vaguely remember, the ever-present inner standard we've lost sight of, the higher calling that's gotten drowned out in the din of marketing messages. Marriage is indeed a divine institution, something created by and provided for by God, not only for the propagation of the species, but so that men and women could discover what real love is, not just the love that brings children into the world, but the love that enables us to experience betrayal and yet not hate, the love that learns to forgive, that learns to be strong and to stand up for what's right, that learns to delay gratification. In other words, the love that makes us fully human. Therefore, without the matrimonial promise made before God and man to stay together forever, without a lifelong commitment inoculating them against hard times, the trials, difficulties, and pain of marriage and raising a family would be too much for many people to handle. When a man and a woman are married, one of the most joyful days of their lives, the officiating minister traditionally seals the wedding ceremony by warning the rest of the world to keep their hands off. Those whom God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. Yet no-fault divorce laws, which by making divorce so easy, have deprived couples of much-needed protection of their marriages during periods of conflict and anger, represent an unimaginably broad and destructive policy of government putting asunder those whom God joined in holy matrimony. So while men and women need to approach marriage with a mature spiritual paradigm such as we've discussed, it's also critical that the government wake up and learn from the sad legacy of its no-fault divorce laws, a generation of broken homes, broken promises, broken spirits. Marriage is too important, too wonderful, and too challenging to have the odds stacked against it due to short-sighted and pernicious easy divorce laws. Enlightened legislators and other leaders must revisit and refashion divorce laws so they serve to protect marriages, not dissolve them. We must once again realize that marriage really is meant to be forever.
And that was The Marketing of Evil, How Radicals, Elitists, and Pseudo-Experts Sell Us Corruption Disguised as Freedom by David Kaplan. And thank you. So this is the postscript to the book, The Marketing of Evil. So he talks about the 60s. First of all, the biggest thing in the 60s was television. And so many people, when they're looking at history and trying to figure out all the cultural, untangle all this cultural baggage, is they forget television. Television was huge. Nobody had ever seen it before. It brought the world right into your living room, and the impact cannot be underestimated. You not only got to hear about what was going on in the rest of the country and very often the rest of the world, you got to see it. And seeing things happen had a huge impact. And television had a way of making things that were small seem much larger than what they really are. So if you had a protest on television, it looked like it was enormous. Everything looked like it was enormous. I remember the first time that I went to a football game after watching it on TV when I was a kid, and I go into the stadium, and the first thing I was impressed with was how small the place was. I thought, wow, look at this. This whole stadium is so small. The field is so small. So it was television that had the biggest influence and the biggest impact on our society. It was shocking. Every day you were shocked by something. President Kennedy's assassination happened on television. So you got to see all of this stuff happen. Now we kind of take it for granted. But at the time, again, it in and of itself was revolutionary. The other thing is that he's talking about in terms of no-fault divorce, was he doesn't understand what the purpose of no-fault divorce and the other issues that the feminists were fighting for, abortion and birth control and whatnot, was power. Power for women at the expense of men. That was the whole point of everything that they were fighting for in the 60s and 70s. It was later on, decades later, that we all discovered, but particularly feminists discovered, that everything that feminism fought for ending up empowering men at the expense of women rather than the other way around. And back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that determinism is optional.